All right, welcome to another episode of Corner Memoirs of the Service Industry, and Happy New Year's, everybody. It's now 2021. I know I've been off for a moment, but I'm back, hoping that we can keep these at a regular clip. I'm not sure if I'm going to continue the schedule of once every week. I think it was a little tough to keep up with getting people booked. So I'm going to try and get them like once every 2 weeks, definitely once a month at the very minimum. So I appreciate everyone who's still sticking by me and enjoying the shows. This week, I bring on a friend, Scott Sullivan. I bring him on because he has a pretty unique story, man. He was a new hire at a restaurant who's their plan to open, and their friends and family was March 20th, and we all got shut down on March 15th. So, we talk about how it was. What that experience was like trying to open up a brand new restaurant in the middle of a pandemic. We also get into a little bit of vintage Amaros and kind of the production and how things have changed over the years in the production in the spirits world. Kind of a cool interview there at the end. Like I said, I'm planning to get back in the swing of things with this, so I appreciate all those who stuck by me. I took a little bit of time off to refocus, but we're back. It's 2021. It's cliche to say that this year will be better than the last, but I think every year is better than the last. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get into service, shall we? You're listening to Corner Memoirs of the Service Industry, a podcast set out to document the lives of those who work in service and hospitality. I'm Eric Chopo, and I'll be running the front of the house tonight. I'm a 22-year vet in the bar and restaurant scene and have worked and managed everything from Michelin star restaurants to dive bars and everything in between. I'm sitting down with members of our industry to talk about why they love doing what they do and share some stories along the way. Around every corner is a new story, a new hire, and a new experience. All right, Scott, how we doing, buddy?
Doing all right.
Yeah. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Scott Sullivan. Scott, what is your bar manager,
head bartender
over at Perle in Pasadena? I wanted to bring you on because Perle, was a much anticipated restaurant opening up. You have some pedigree along with it, and we can get into it. But you guys were slated to open up. Was it actually March of 2020 or a little before March?
Our friends and family was going to be March 20th.
Okay. And then for those who don't know, LA got shut down on March 15th. So right before your friends and family.
Yeah. So we had a couple days. I was involved a little bit earlier, but we had a few days of training with the whole staff. I think it was Thursday, Friday. We were supposed to come back Monday through Wednesday and then open up on that Friday.
Right.
And we did those 2 days of training and then didn't come back for 4 months.
Jeez. Yeah.
So whatever it was.
Yeah. So what was that like, man? I mean, like, I know you were there relatively close to the beginning. You were one of the early hires of that establishment. So, it's how do you say his last name? Chef Dean Yasharian. So, for those who don't know, worked in New York, is a French trained chef, correct? And worked under a couple of Michelin star restaurants in his restaurant. So like in his career, yeah. So having this being his, his first restaurant I'm assuming his first restaurant. I didn't see any others under his resume, but, this is his owner operator.
Yeah.
I
can go over his. So sure. his whole CV is really interesting, actually. So he worked for Danielle Boulud at Danielle, which is a 3 Michelin star restaurant in New York. Worked for Danielle for about 10 years on and off. He worked for restaurant Gordon Ramsay, which is a Gordon 3 Michelin star restaurant.
Yeah.
And then his first executive chef job was Bar Boulud in London, which won Best New Restaurant in London. And then he came back to the States, ran the Chateau Marmont before opening this.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I got to imagine, you being on the inside, how frustrating that must have been I'm assuming had been working on this in concept for a good solid year, maybe even longer, trying to get all the pieces moving. Here you go. You're weeks away from, friends and family. And then, the world shuts down. What was the sense when you were there? Like, was it, obviously you guys have been open and you guys have been really successful since you've been open. So clearly there was a mindset to like, let's forge ahead, but talk us through those first few days, weeks of like when you guys got shut down. What was the thought process there?
It was very open-ended because obviously like no one knew what was happening. Mm-hmm. We were talking about if the shutdown was even going to happen. Everyone was kind of, it was up in the air. Our GM, beverage director, wine director, Roderick Daniels, mm-hmm. He was basically like, hey, look, we don't know. Like, we'll let you know what happens. And then the news started coming in. I was working I came in, helped design the bar, I helped design the menu, did all this, like we're working towards the right thing. We finally got in our orders on that Friday for that next week. And then, it was just like, oh, I guess we're not going to open. Maybe it'll be a few weeks, maybe it'll be a month, whatever. And then the news keeps rolling in and keeps rolling in and keeps rolling in. And it gets, it was crazy. Because we were slated to be one of the big restaurant openings of the year. Yeah. And we were gonna, our food's really, Dean is an amazing chef. Actually, the whole team is kind of incredible. His wife, Pauline, does all the social media and does a lot of the customer facing stuff. And she's incredible too. And and the design of the restaurant and mm-hmm. the flower arranging and, she's kind of an all-star. She doesn't get as much credit as she should. And then Roderick is an amazing sommelier and he's a great GM too. And we just have like this awesome team and everyone was like, we're like, all right, we got this. This is going to be great. Yeah. We're going to start off small because like small restaurant, those are the two owners, Pauline and Dean, mm-hmm. Wife and husband. And so, amazing team. Everyone's super excited. Everyone, we know we're gonna crush it. Yeah. And we were just waiting for friends and family, which was going to be like 300 people over 2 days or something like that, or maybe more. It was really exciting. And then, we just didn't have anything, didn't know, no news. I guess we all started applying for unemployment that week, just in case. Yeah. And then, it wasn't until June we put out our first food. Yeah. So March through June.
And Pasadena was, you guys had, and here in LA, we're calling it Al Fresco, which is a dumb name in my opinion, but mm-hmm. essentially you guys have taken over the street side parking and kind of extended your patio into about like 6 feet into the street.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Right. So you're able to put, I think when I was there, maybe 20 tables. Was it 20, like 15, 20?
We have 30. We had at max capacity, I think it was 34 seats. Okay. But as the regulations started getting a little stricter, I think it got down to 28 seats was our max.
Right. Not ideal for a fine dining experience. No. And, inside and what would have been outside, I'm assuming you probably would have been at least double that capacity, if not slightly more. So,
yeah, we're supposed to be around 60.
How did their, I'm always curious about this because, I think like there's a lot of fine dining restaurants that I know that didn't have the ability to open up like patios, outdoor seating. So they've been strictly doing a new like to-go model, which is, that's kind of like getting blood from a stone. It's kind of, you're fixed on what you can do, but they're getting by. How did service change for you guys? How did the management change their their outlook on how to provide that top level service. But obviously in the new, I mean, did anything really change, or was it just like, hey man, our sections are now outside, let's give the same level of service? Or was there any certain tweaks, or like, okay, maybe we can kind of step back on the fine dining and a little bit more about just making customers happy?
Our service actually never changed in terms of like steps of service. We were really lucky to have Roderick like kind of sitting there making sure that we all were doing. I mean, I was the first server, so I was the only server in the restaurant. So we started. Right. The only difference would be our team didn't exist.
Okay.
So, I mean, through the first month of service, we probably had like, it was me and Roderick on the first day. We had a couple people come in to help on the second day, just work for free with us. Just literally helping us out because they were friends with Roderick. And they're the only reason why we got through the second day, because man, It was rough. It was, sommelier has to do all the wines. Oh, actually we were open for indoor at that point. So we opened indoor dining in June. It was I think it was open for around 3 weeks. We only did it for a week because then it shut down when we did that. The steps of service were all the same. Everything was the same. We just didn't have a large team because we kept everybody on, but no one was available because it kind of just happened. So a lot of people were on the other side of the country. A lot of people were outside of the country. So, whatever. One of my coworkers had to, she's a primary caretaker for her father or grandfather, and she had to leave because she couldn't be around anybody, which was crazy. So, it's just, we just don't have a team. So it was a lot more difficult than it should have been. And then when we started getting more and more on the team, hiring new people, doing new things, then we switched to outdoor and nothing changed. Everything was the same. Obviously my job is a lot different because I was bartender. Yeah. And we don't have a bar.
And now you're migrating over to server and,
which admittedly I'm not great at. Especially, I can get by, but fine dining server is not, I'm a bartender. I like to talk. So it's not what you want to do.
Yeah. I personally honestly, it's not as fine dining, but like when we were at Faith, I think some of the best servers there were the ones who were able to bounce between talking a little bit and being personal. I think that goes a long way as a server, in my opinion. I've never enjoyed as a customer, a server who's like stoic completely. I feel like I'm not welcomed. I feel like they're trying to turn and burn me. So I think that goes as a former bartender turned server in my career. I feel like the bartender in me made me a better server. So I'm sure you're doing just fine.
I also agree. I also realized the situation that we were in, which we didn't have bussers. We didn't have runners. Right. I was running all the food, bussing all the tables, getting every glass, every water, everything. So
I'll tell you what, because
turn and burn.
I'll tell you what, because I think for me, I had done some serving here and there. A lot of the bars that I started off in my career were like very small, like divey bars, maybe like one cocktail bar. But when I first started serving, it was in a small bistro where there were no bus staff, and it was 5 of us, maybe 4 of us a night because it was small. It was about like 5 table sections a piece, and we were the runners, we were the bussers, and we all pooled, so we all ran and bussed everyone's table for the first. I got the pool gone because not to pat myself on the back too much, but I was like earning a shit ton in that place, and then seeing my tips get divvied out and like cut in half, and I told the manager, I was like, I can't keep like, either you got to get them going out of here or like get rid of the pool, but I digress. But yeah, it made me a better server because it's you end up having better restaurant eyes at the end of it when you have to do everything. I think when you're a server and you rely too much on a back staff, you get a little lazy and a little complacent. And I always believe that I think if you're doing everything, you're going to be better overall. So again, you're getting best training, because I know this isn't what you want to do, but I feel like you could be slotted in any fine dining restaurant now and just be killing it. Because
I mean, it is a great experience. What I eventually fell into because of some other things happening, I became the only expo in the restaurant.
Okay.
So now I'm expoing slash helping cook. It's an interesting scenario. So I'm on the path expoing, but I'm doing all the soup preparation.
Right.
And I'm like a second eyes for chef for garde manger seasoning and like plating, and then also like using, that sounds lame, but using a salamander.
Yeah.
Just like making sure nothing burns,
yeah.
using that for toasting, stuff like that. Yeah. And it that fits I have more kitchen experience than I do serving experience. So that fits me a lot better.
Right.
And we have some extremely amazing servers now that are like really awesome. And we have some more back staff as well, which is great. First few weeks were rough.
Right.
I bet the first day opening, because we also didn't have any training, because we kind of just like, all right, we're gonna go. First day 12 covers feels like 60.
Yeah. Especially when you're flying by the seat of your pants and the direction isn't quite there, and you end up, you're not in a rhythm yet, so you're like bumping into walls essentially and just trying to find your way. So you guys, you got a staff going. We're now into the fall. Things are kind of in full swing. Pasadena, you're like right there on essentially a restaurant row. I don't know if it's officially called that, but there's a few restaurants like up and down the street. And now you're kind of in full swing. Then everything gets shut down again around the end of the year. What's it going on now? Clearly, you're not doing outdoor seating anymore because we're not allowed to. So how has the restaurant been able to transition? So we were doing outdoor dining for like a few weeks after everybody else got shut down, and then we got shut down by the state as well. But those 3 weeks were interesting. We had cops coming by every night to make sure. After the first few nights, no one was really sure about the curfew, and we were getting conflicting information from Pasadena, or from people that were close to Pasadena, or whoever we're getting information from, that we didn't have to follow curfew either. So a little clarification for those who don't know, Pasadena, LA County shut down outdoor dining, and Pasadena, because they have their own health department, they kind of have their own city council. They made the decision as a city to ignore LA's guidance and stay open with outdoor dining, because they felt that their mitigation of everything was being handled in a different or better way than LA was. So that lasted, you said, about 2 weeks, and then you guys
something like that. Yeah.
So all right,
it was nice because we were crazy busy those 2 weeks that we were open.
Only game in town, pretty much.
Yeah, and then we got shut down, or then we were getting the police every night. Every night at 10 o'clock on the dot, police would show up and tell us / tell our customers to leave, which was really uncomfortable and not great. And we have an hour and a half turn time for all of our tables. Yeah. But soufflés take 20 minutes. Yeah. And if they order 4 courses, you're pushing that hour and a half pretty close. Yeah. And so that hour and a half might be at 10 o'clock, and that's not the best for customers. Right. And so they were really stringent on everything. And then they started getting, we started having people measuring our tables. We started having, every single thing that you could possibly have. We didn't get dinged for anything, which is great. It was just, we just had to really make sure that everything was by the book, which we were already doing before, but it's, 6 inches one way or 6 inches the other. It potentially could make us get shut down or not. Yeah. Which is not great. So then, and I feel like because of their reaction to all of that, because they had to kind of show that we were the best dining in LA, and like we were following all the rules and all that kind of stuff. They shut down those restaurants. They reopened those restaurants. They shut down more restaurants. They just kept going back and forth. And then when the state finally shut down everything, I feel like now, because they're so strict, they don't have the ability to open in the way that they should be able to. Like, I don't know if you've
like Pasadena as a whole, or you guys?
Yeah, Pasadena as a whole.
Okay.
So they just voted the other day to allow all of the parks that everybody put up, to allow everybody to leave their tables outside for people to just sit down and eat.
Okay.
They just voted on that, I think, last week.
Okay. So kind of a to-go scenario, and you can just sit down at a table with your to-go food.
Exactly.
Right.
Meanwhile, South Bay, I don't know if you've been anywhere south of LA right now.
Yeah.
Fully open, indoor dining, indoor bars. LA, Orange County, same way. No one's getting hurt. No one's doing anything. People are advertising on the outside of their buildings. They're open for dining in. That is not allowed currently in California. If anybody didn't know that, still, everybody is shut down. No one cares. Everyone's. Yeah, it's kind of a cluster.
I personally walk this fine line of, the libertarian in me, the don't tread on me type kind of goes, just, you have every right as a business owner to make your own decisions. But then the realist in me realizes that the people who keep doing this are making it tougher for the ones who, because here's the thing, right? There is different levels of dining, and there's different neighborhoods and different communities, and restaurants mean different things to different people. Right. So I think that in a city like, in the South Bay, like if you say like, go down to Long Beach or something where that community, might be slightly more blue collar as far as a whole, like less of the fancy restaurants and more of taverns and, family oriented type dining, that it's important for them to be open to serve their community because, it's a much needed break from the monotony of the lockdown. And I think they're doing a better service to their community by being open. Not to mention there isn't a ton of money there. They aren't pulling in millions of dollars in revenue every year. They're more mom and pop in orientation. So I'm like, be open. You should, because you deserve to make a living. But then because we're so connected and we're in, we're in this, our state's the size of a country and is really like 4 states in one state, that what they're doing down there affects us, because the reality of the situation is it's not the local economy that we're concerned about. It's the fact that if San Pedro's hospitals are overrun, they go to San Diego or they come up here to LA. And that's the thing that I don't think the average person understands, is it's not about your hospital intake right now. It's about the neighboring ones, because like Ventura County right now, their hospitals are open. So LA sends their overflow up to Ventura. So eventually, because if LA is not taking it as seriously as Ventura, which isn't the case, but if it is the case, then they get our overflow. So then they get more restrictions put down because they can't handle the same amount of patients. So I think that's the missing part of the conversation that people don't get. It's not about you as an individual or as an individual company. It's about us as a community. So I get torn with that. At the same time, I'm like, fuck them, be open, like make your money. Because there isn't enough support structure from California to help them out, So I get torn, but at the same time, if the more they do that, the more they do that, the longer it's going to take for the rest of us to get, back up and running. So,
I'm not opposed to restaurants opening. If they can get away with it, they can get away with it. It's the problem of like, all right, if everyone knows the South Bay is now open, then everyone drives up to an hour to get to those places because they want, like LA or California in general is a driving culture. It's not New York where you don't have a car or you take public transit or you go across town.
Right.
It is, you drive, and it's really easy to drive, and you drive everywhere. So like I know back in my hometown in Fresno, as soon as Fresno shut down because it had bad cases back in March, Clovis was still open, which is like the equivalent of Santa Monica, Venice, like right butted up against each other where you kind of don't know which one is which. And everyone just went to Clovis to dine. So then the Clovis number is spiked, and then they had to shut down Clovis too.
I remember it's like when they started banning smoking in bars. I remember, ironically, a town in Texas, I forget which one, was one of the first in the country to ban smoking in bars. So what happened? Everyone just went to the next county over to those bars. And within about 4 or 5 months, the county that banned smoking, most of those bars started closing down because everyone just went to the next county over to go have, because it's something that people, I mean, and I look at it the same way, is like that growing pains of maybe 2 years of people really raging and saying, hey, the fine is not worth the loss in revenue, or isn't as bad as the loss in revenue. So fine me for allowing people to smoke in my establishment. I know in Hollywood, a lot of clubs were like that. Like, fuck it, give me the fine. Because it having people smoke in the VIP lounge is allowing me to sell hundreds of thousands of dollars, monthly of booze. So like, fuck it, I'll pay the $5,000 fine. I think that it took a while before that became normal. So I think a lot of the restrictions we're starting to see, there's a big growing pains right now and people are raging against it. And I think that eventually there'll be a period where this just becomes the way of life. The only difference is, depending on who you talk to, I don't think the smoking thing was as dangerous as what we're going through right now. Clearly it's not good for you long term, but it wasn't such an immediate threat. It's kind of what we're facing it. So, I don't know. So
we could do something in Pasadena, because we're doing to go now. So
good.
We've been doing to go. We had our full menu available to go, which was a lot. There's a lot to do. A lot of storage, a lot of, it's a lot. And so I think it was 2 weeks ago, or no, sorry, it was before New Year's, before Christmas, actually. We decided to do a dinner set kind of celebration meal with suckling pig and truffle salad and a couple other things for Christmas and New Year's, and kind of some days around those as well. And it was really successful.
Good.
We were, I think we were kind of like the first day we didn't do as many covers as we could have. On the days leading up to Christmas. Christmas Eve was, I think, 90 orders. And then New Year's Eve, we just shut off restrictions for however many people. We restricted a little bit. We were doing 3 orders or 3 parties every 15 minutes.
Okay.
So New Year's Eve, I think we had 150 orders.
Okay. Wow.
Which was insane.
Yeah.
Like, great.
Yeah.
More than we were doing in outdoor dining.
Yeah.
So it was great. So now we're switching over to that model. And we're doing every week, we're doing new regions of France and doing a whole new menu every week.
Yeah. Good.
Off that. So we didn't do a region first. We did Paris, and just foods that are very popular in Paris. And then we're starting Bordeaux tomorrow.
Awesome. Yeah. I believe in these times, I've always kind of, I know I've had conversations about this. I believe that eliminating choice for the customer ends up providing them with a better experience. Because if you give them too many options, it can bog down the kitchen. And right now, when there's so much importance on being lean and mean and being able to operate with such minimal waste, I think offering a full menu is shooting yourself in the foot. Having something small, more curated, and it allows you to control the product costs. It allows you to provide a better experience overall to the guests. So kudos to that. I think that's a smart way to go about it right now.
My best dining during quarantine has been Vespertine. Actually, I don't know if you've checked what they're doing out.
No.
So the 2 Michelin star restaurant, Vespertine, run by Jordan Kahn. Normally they do like a crazy extravagant, like you change levels depending on what courses you're on, and you have like a really amazing restaurant. I haven't been because it's, I think, $350 a person, something around there, $300 a person. Their to-go, their takeout has been incredible.
Okay.
So I've done three of them so far. First one I did was Food of the Maya, And so I think it was like $65 a person, and it was like 12 courses or 10 courses of all food traditionally cooked and traditionally sourced from Mayan cuisine.
Oh, wow.
Then I did a Cuban one, and because he's Cuban. Then he did all of the food his grandmother, like all of his grandmother's recipes.
Right.
And it was
that sounds awesome.
Insane. Then I did a collaboration with Sean Brock, the Southern chef. So it was a extremely high-end Southern cuisine meal, which I've never been able to have at his restaurant. I've been to go to his restaurant. So this was awesome. And all three were incredible. Then they give stories. They send you a whole like curated website. They go line by line, every dish, and they give either a history or a personal note or
that's fun.
Why it's served. Yeah, it's incredible. And so that's kind of where I want to take this like regions of France thing too. Because I'm doing a little bit of the research currently for giving a little pamphlet out.
Right. That sounds actually really like a smart idea. I mean, it's essentially, I think a good business model. It's funny how most people haven't done this. Right now, this is essentially would have been Dine LA would have been in the middle of Dine LA right now. And I think that taking that Dine LA approach of small, this is just kind of a tasting menu of what we do. You do that with your to-go model. I don't see how that can't be successful because, you make sure that you're as profitable as you can on the items as an establishment, but also offering as much of a value to the customer. You're going to get more orders out the window and get more eyes on your product. So when the world does open back up inevitably here, that if you've been able to survive, that you have kind of this captured audience of what you do. So when they can go back, they will. I want to switch gears slightly. I want to, I think there's something you're into that I think I've always been, enjoyed about. And I don't know if a lot of people are aware of this as a market, but you are very much into vintage spirits, especially like vintage Amaros, right? How did you get into that? Talk to us a little bit about where that love of, old liquor came from.
So I haven't gotten much into old liquor because it is an extremely pricey endeavor. Yeah. But Amaro was my first kind of foray into vintage spirit or vintage alcohols. Mm-hmm. And so when I started bartending, or my first bar job was at the Ponte under Ryan Wainwright. Mm-hmm. And eventually went over to Faith and Flower with him and the whole team as well. And that was my introduction into the bar world. Before that, I was in coffee and a bunch of other jobs, tech, and and so the main thing that I learned at Ponte that I think was kind of invaluable was like Ryan taught me how to balance drinks, and Ryan and the whole team. I'll keep saying that because it was a whole. It takes a team to do that whole thing. But the main thing I learned was how to balance drinks, and I learned the vast majority of the spirit collection that we had there, which was insane. I think it was the largest Amaro collection in LA. Okay. Over 90 Amaro on the back shelf, plus vermouth in the dozens. I don't even know how many we had because we had a bunch in the back room, and then we had a lot in the fridge, and I never counted them. But yeah, over 90 Amaro, which I pretty much knew all of them at the time. Wow. And something that Ryan used to do is he used to buy. So you're not allowed to sell vintage spirits. Okay. Which most people don't realize unless you get it through, because you have to get anything you sell at a restaurant through a distributor. Right. So that's to prevent against fraud and all that kind of stuff. So there is one place in Chicago that sells, that is a distributor that can sell to a restaurant that can sell those things. But if you have vintage spirits on your back bar, it's usually not allowed to sell. Okay. So what we would do is just if somebody cool came in, like he would buy a bunch of stuff himself from a guy he met in Italy once, and he just has him send him. He never told us his source, which I'm kind of mad about. But yeah, he would just text him like, "Hey, I got this new bottle. Do you want it?" And then ship it to him.
Yeah,
which is great. So we would have it up there. I would taste them. The thing that's crazy, and this is like where it really got like hit home for me, where we would have side by side of the new product, and then maybe 6, or we would have up to 4 of the vintage products from different decades.
Okay.
So we would have here's the 1960s, here's the 1950s, here's a 1980s, and then here's the new product.
Right.
And so we would do side by sides of all that. And that was, you can see how much different, I mean, obviously they change over time in the bottle, but you can see how the recipe changed, when it changed, all this kind of stuff. And you kind of, those products are gone. And
so what's like, just like for those who are uneducated, what's kind of the basic changes from like, say, just something like 40 years ago to now? What are some of those changes you were tasting?
I don't want to like be controversial, but I'll be a little bit controversial.
Go for it.
Most of the products that are very well known, I think, got way more synthetic.
Okay.
Or extracts, and they're not using actually whole products, or they change. There is a through note that I noticed on most Amaros, and I think it was sugar and the unrefined sugar or less refined sugar that they were using back before the 80s.
Right.
And you can kind of taste similarities between all of the Italian Amaros, where there's a backbone of like molasses or unrefined sugar. That is and so and the new stuff is just a little too clean, and it kind of lost all of its character.
Gotcha.
And also it depends on this is something a lot of other people don't know as well. Depends on where you're buying your alcohols. So Campari, for instance, Campari tastes nothing like the old Campari. Tempus Fugit, what is their product? Their product is actually the closest remaining thing to the original Campari recipe.
Right. I just remember with Campari, I remember it was real recently in recent history, they moved over to red number 5 or whatever that dye is to color it, and moved away from Cocacina beetle. So, because I remember when St. George's Bruto Americano came out, that was their big selling point, is, hey, we still use Cocacina beetles to color, which adds in a slight flavored profile to it as well, because you're using an actual like insect to color it, so there's going to have some byproduct in it when you do it. Grand
Classico. I just looked up the Tempus Fugit product. Cool. Grand Classico is actually the closest to Campari's original formula.
Right, because Bruto is a little light. It isn't as
Bruto. Bruto is an American company. Tempus Fugit is actually John is a good dude. He's not, he's American as well. Okay. But his, I believe I had a 3-hour conversation with him one night. I think his friend was a historian in Italy and just keeps finding a bunch of distillery manuals from the distilleries, not like a published recipe. It's just like, here's how we train people.
Gotcha.
So he has a bunch of antique and not around distillery manuals, and he plotted them all in Excel.
Oh, cool.
Every recipe, so here's this type of Amaro. Here's every recipe that I have, and here's all of the ingredients that are similar. And then he would go through and then kind of concoct a recipe based around the historic recipes.
Right.
And then he has a place in Italy make it for him.
That's awesome.
Or he buys he buys from a distillery that has been making something since the 1700s, and then doing that.
See, I love that people are doing that, because it's what I fell for. And I was duped, but it was why I really was gung-ho behind Templeton Rye when they came out, because I bought into the story of, hey, we found this old bootlegger's recipe in a barn. We believe this is what Al Capone's product was, what he called the good stuff. So this is a prohibition era rye, only to find out that they were getting their barrels from Indiana's food packing company like everybody else, and that there was nothing special about it at all. And I remember when those first like 6 months when that product came out, I bought that hook, line, and sinker. But I do respect the idea of, there was a certain level of care, because I agree with you. I think that now, since things are such mass produced, that things like Campari, things like Fernet are cult favorites, and they're these huge bar staples that you have to start cutting corners in how you produce it, because you're producing it at such a level that if you can find those old recipes to actually take the level of care again, and make them the way that they made them, even 40 years ago before the profits were the only guiding force in a company's mind. I think that's something awesome. I wish some of that information was more readily available. More people were able to do that. I mean, clearly it wouldn't be as special, but I just think that when we talked, you and I talked a lot about like artisanal stuff back in the day, like, everything put artisanal in front of it, but like, this is artisanal to me. This is actually being what the food world looks as artisanal. Let's source heirloom products. Let's try to make things as authentic as they used to. I think artisanal and small batch started becoming kind of synonymous with each other, and they don't mean the same thing. Just because you make it a small batch doesn't mean you're being like artisanal, in my opinion. So especially in like the spirit world, I feel like they threw that word around a lot, and it didn't mean what they thought it meant. Yeah.
Well, so two things come to mind. I lost my train of thought earlier. But where your product is also produced is a really big, is a really interesting thing. Campari in different countries is produced by Smith & Cross, the rum. Okay. So if you don't know Smith & Cross, it's a fantastic rum, dark rum that a lot of tiki bars use. Mm-hmm. And they produce the base product for Campari for those things. So it's produced by Smith & Cross. It is a completely different product.
Gotcha.
So for different markets, they make different Camparis and different, even like the liquor changes depending on where you are in the country. Mm-hmm. And so it's really interesting when you start getting into, and this isn't publicly available either, unless you do a lot of deep digging with a lot of nerdy people online, or if somebody comes from that country and tells you about these things. There's kind of no way to figure these things out. But that is a really big problem with the spirits industry in general. There's not a lot of good information. Right. And there's things that bartenders seem to know. And this is tequila is my biggest problem in the industry, is because there's no information that's actually reputable that a public person can readily access for finding out what is a good product, what is not taking advantage of people, what is not ruining the countryside, what is not, like they're not picking early, all these things. There's no reputable source of information for that. Right. And I don't know what it's ever going to take to do that, but that's something that would be incredible. I know Gracias Madre, bar director there, is an incredible resource. We have to go there and talk to him. Yeah. And so he'll throw out information to people that are there, but he doesn't publish it either. No one publishes these things. No one talks about these things. And then the general public, I would say 99% of everybody just thinks Patron is a really good product. And then Don Julio 1942 is really worth the money.
I had a buddy of mine, Dylan, who worked for I want to say like Casamigos or something. And when he went down to Mexico and went to the farm where Casamigos is produced, and he came back and he goes, the amount of information of agave spirits that Americans don't know could fill the Grand Canyon. And I think part of the and I think it's similar to things like cognacs and Armagnacs. I always think that there's a good correlation there. For those who don't know, about 90% of all cognacs produced in France get shipped out worldwide, and get shipped out worldwide, and they hold on to about 10% of the really good stuff within country. But then you look at Armagnacs, it's the reverse. 90% of Armagnacs stay in France and only 10% go out to the market. When it comes to agave spirits, we still as consumers here don't know a lot, and we're fed a lot of crap because, without obviously being controversial again, it's a very cartel controlled business. It's a government controlled business as well. So much so that the Mexican wine industry is suffering because they do not want it to take off and dip into any profits they're making off of tequila. So they tax it at such a high rate for export. So it's actually, it's more expensive to get, that here in the States because they don't want it taking off in popularity. So I think the answer to your questions, I think it ends up being, if we can break up the stronghold of the tequila industry, you start to have more transparency. I also think rich celebrities should stop going down and sponsoring tequila companies, but I think that's damaging more than it's.
They're actual. I forgot about this. The biggest resource that anybody can use, and this is something that it took me a little bit longer to figure out. If you find a tequila company that you think is good, and you do your research on, and you've proven that they are good, like Siembra Azul is in my opinion, like the benchmark of how a tequila company should act. Mm-hmm. You can look at the NOM on the back, NOM, and then a number. And because it is a government controlled thing, there is full transparency into where it's distilled, who it's distilled by, where it's made, right. Like how it's bottled, all this kind of things, as much information as you can. And then you can look at the other products that are involved with that as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's something that is really interesting as well. And actually, Siembra is doing a lot of great things with transparency for just telling people how little everyone is paid for everything, right. Which is not enough money, basically slavery. And a lot of people don't know about the celebrity thing either, is that they aren't even really involved. Like, people think that these celebrities are going in and they're buying these companies, but that's not what they do. They're approached by these tequila companies to sell their new product, and that's their sales tactic, is to attach it.
I mean,
because of George Clooney, basically.
I think I honestly, and I could just be buying into a little bit more of the propaganda. I would imagine, knowing of the type of person Clooney portrays himself to be, I feel like out of everyone, he's probably a little bit more involved in what's going on, because I think he has a vested personal interest into stuff like that. Like, I don't think he puts his name, he isn't somebody who slaps his name on everything. Now, the like Bryan Cranston one, I think, is strictly just exactly that. It's just like, hey guys, here's the Dos Brothers, or whatever the hell they call it, tequila or mezcal company. And I don't think they have any idea of what's happening. I think that's strictly just a sponsorship play.
I mean, from what I know about Casamigos' production, you shouldn't want to put his name on that. I'm not saying he's informed. Yeah. I'm saying I think he probably digs slightly deeper than everybody else. I also understand it's a very secretive, cartel controlled business. And even a lot of, as you know, a lot of the smaller farms, smaller manufacturers, like the companies that actually try to make a difference, they're still have to deal with these cartels in some level to get the product out. Even if they're trying to do as good as they can, I still think there's a roadblock there that is hard for them to get through. Everyone should look up David Suro if they haven't heard of him before, and follow him on Instagram, read all of his posts. He's the owner and importer he's Suro Imports, who imports all of the Siembra products, which are his products, or he works with those farms directly. Mm-hmm. And then he also imports some Mexican rum now, which is going to be great. Right. Paranubes is him.
I have a really nice Mexican gin on my back bar at home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's they call it an agave gin, and I think it's just because they use some agave in the manufacturing of it. But it's definitely not a tequila gin by any means. But there is that slight earthiness more to it. But
it could also be flavored, because gin doesn't really have any restrictions. So they could also add. There's a thing called tequila flavoring, which a lot of people don't know about either. Which is you can just buy on Amazon.
Yep. And it's also, that's what Montezuma is. For those who don't know, if you go to like any shitty bar and you get tequila and they pull out a bottle, this is Montezuma tequila, you're drinking tequila flavored vodka, not actually tequila.
Yeah. You can get caramel coloring and tequila flavor product on Amazon right now, because I tried to buy it. Because I want to taste what it's like. But it's in my cart right now, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really interesting because most people don't realize how much sugar and artificial flavor and it's glycerin, not necessarily sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar, artificial flavoring, and caramel color. If something is called amber, does not mean it was aged.
Right. Just like tequila gold is not aged either.
Or gold, yeah. Amber or gold, whatever it is, it's not an aged product. It's a flavor, or it's a colored product and a flavored product.
Yeah.
And they it's not great. Most actually, you're allowed, I believe, up to I might be wrong on the number, but I think it's around 5% caramel coloring in any tequila product.
Right.
So like 1942 and all these things, they can up the caramel coloring just so they can look fancier, even though no one in Mexico aged their products until Jack Daniels came around.
Yeah.
So we forced us Americans, we forced them to age their tequila products so it would sell better in the US. Yeah,
I mean, look, I love myself an añejo every now and then, but I definitely think that, pure distilled, unaged agave spirits is kind of where it's at, because you actually can taste the terroir in products. I always feel like agave falls in line more with wines than it does with most spirits, because there is a terroir aspect of it. Regions taste different. Blue agave in the southern region versus blue agave in the mountains is going to taste different, much like the same Pinot Noir grapes. I wish the
mezcal is different species of agave as well.
That's kind of why I gravitated to it years ago, was because it was like a truer expression of the agave plant. Yes, there's some smokiness into it that can get in the way of tasting it, but at least you have an opportunity to taste different flavors. It's like hops in the same way. A lot of people still are uneducated they like their hazy IPAs because it tastes like pineapple. And so they think there's pineapple in it, but it's not. It's the hops just have that flavor profile when you steep them for a certain period of time at a certain point of, the brewing process. So that's what's great about, using plants to distill stuff, same thing with rums. I mean, I think that most of us just think I'm going to drink Captain Morgan's when there's you're a big rum guy. There's a wealth of better products out there that taste, way different from, two rums never taste the same if you actually are going to these places that are doing it properly and not for, the profit. I
would say for the general person, actually, I know we were talking about tequila being difficult and not transparent. Rum is even worse. Rum is the hardest category of spirit to really get a grasp on. There is so much just legislations involved with different countries of how much sugar is allowed in your rum, how much it's crazy. There's so many different types of rum, so many different terroirs, so many different types of distilling. Basically, it's hard to even categorize, because you're like, cool, there's this French style rum versus Spanish style rum, but you're like, all right, well, that's French style rum that's done in Spanish style, and there's an exception over here, and there's an exception over here, and there's this person over here that's doing a completely different thing, and now there's Mexican rum, which is a completely different style, and then
I mean, look, you want to go back to some of the old cartel run stuff. You just look at the sugar trade, man. The sugar trade is one of the big reasons why slave trade even started on the planet. It was one of the first, multi-million dollar industries hundreds of years ago. The sugar trade is no joke. And I definitely think that, when you start looking at, the Caribbean and these countries that are producing it, they have long history with that being the real currency within their countries is the sugar trade, import, export, and the control of that. So, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. I'm a little shocked. I'm a little shocked that we don't have that same kind of shit going on here with when it comes to like whiskeys and everything. But at the same time, you know, one can make whiskey out of their basement if they chose to, because it's, you know, I think wheat's a little bit like you can just grow it, and on the back it's a little bit more accessible of a product than a lot of these other things. But
and we as Americans did one of the best things ever, which is created bourbon and protected bourbon, and now we have a protected product that is one of the only American products. And yeah, you can get, no matter the price of bourbon, it is tasty. Yeah. And that's the best thing about dive bars is you can walk in and order a bourbon for $5 and enjoy your day, versus whiskey. You don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. And then that was kind of why I started going away from bourbons, because they're all the same. They're all the same. And degrees of difference between paying, you know, top dollar versus it was so minuscule. Like, I don't have the best palate in the world. And I even think some of the best palates in the world are hard to really find drastic differences between them all, but there are there. But I think it's just for the average consumer, man, just buy yourself a $7 glass of bourbon and just be happy with it.
Yeah. Even the best palates in the world there's something to enjoyment versus necessarily the best as well.
Yeah.
If you're going to a bar, you don't necessarily want the most expensive bourbon you can possibly have and the most interesting bourbon. Sometimes you just want Buffalo Trace.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just want, Mellow Corn is my guilty pleasure American whiskey of choice.
Kentucky Gentleman. I'm a big fan of Kentucky Gentleman. Yeah.
Old Crow's great.
Yeah.
All these things are great, and you're going to enjoy them dramatically. And most whiskey bars will have them.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay way less, and you're going to have a good time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't want wine aged or wine finished in this for 10 years, and then you got, whatever the hell it is. Were 25 for way too much money.
Were you bartending about I want to say 6 years ago when the bar, so it was about 6 years ago, was around the time where the bar community started really learning that Weller is essentially
I remember that
same juice as Pappy. And so we were able to have Weller was a $10 shot almost anywhere here in Los Angeles. And for those of us in the know, we were drinking it at these nice places. It's great. It's great juice. But essentially it's exactly it's the same base product as that Pappy goes on to be. So you're getting it at a huge discount, but then the world kind of caught on to it. So now these bottles of Weller are being sold for way too outrageous price. And people are now, what was it, a $25, $30 bottle is now a $70, $80, $100 bottle in some liquor stores because the jig is up. But what's
crazy is even in the last 4 years, I think is when it really accelerated its growth in price wise.
Yeah.
Maybe 3, but I don't know if you were there at the time at Faith and Flower when we had Weller as our well. No. It was our well bourbon.
Yeah.
We had a private label. It was Weller 10 or Weller, the red label. What's that one again?
Oh,
it's not antique. It's I'm blanking on the name. It's the red label, whatever. Mm-hmm. That was our well because it was how cheap it was.
Wow.
We flew through that in a little bit, and everybody would always ask oh, what's your well for this old fashioned? And we pull out private label Weller for $12 pour.
Yeah.
Just or $12 a drink, actually, I think it was at the time. That was, people's minds were blown.
The if I remember correctly, wasn't Makers what was the well for? I know it was I know Buffalo was a well because
it was a well primarily just because that was how Faith got their Pappy anyways, because they flew through Buffalo products like crazy. Yeah. But also we liked our products too. So even at Ponce, it was Buffalo.
I still think Buffalo Trace is the go-to, in my opinion, for a proper, a traditional old fashioned, because I think it plays the best with Angostura bitters. I think those two are a match made in heaven. They're like peanut butter jelly in my eyes, as opposed to a lot of other bourbons in that category. I don't know why. I'm not smart enough to know why. I just know what I like, and I think they play very well together. So I've always thought that was the go-to pull off the shelf. That's what I make an old fashioned with. I might pick something else for a Manhattan, but I think that's my go-to old fashioned bourbon. All right, let's wrap this up, my friend. I can talk spirits with you literally all day.
Talk for an hour.
I just think we end up becoming an audience of two. Like it's just you and I geeking over it. But all right, so right now you guys are doing to go. What's what's next for you? How is 2021 shaping up for you? What are you looking forward to this year? Obviously getting life back to normal, but are you branching out? Are you doing anything slightly different? How's it looking for you?
Well, personally, I just took out fishing again. So awesome. I just went fishing the other day on the pier, caught 4 fish. It was great. And playing a lot of video games. And that's my difference because I actually have time to do that now. But no, professionally, it's going to be interesting because I haven't bartended now since March.
Right.
And I haven't shaken a drink since March. So it's going to be a really hard day of relearning when we get back into the bar. I'm hoping by the end of the year, my bar is open.
Okay.
And hopefully transitioning over there instead of just expoing and actually doing the job I was hired to do.
Sure.
Everyone else is like, yeah, we can't wait. And I'm like, yeah, I really want to do that. And, making new cocktails and doing all that. Our cocktails are really interesting at the time. Like we only have one currently on the menu, but it's a 5 day to 9 day process. It's a bottled wine punch, bottled carbonated wine punch. That is, I call it Golden State Punch. It's really awesome. And then we have I was launching a soju martini before that.
Cool.
And that I can keep in bottles because basically anything that I have right now, I can't be behind the bar to shake or stir or do anything. So I have to have those ready made.
Yeah.
And to temp and So everything's pre-batched in bottles, kept on ice, or the ones that are carbonated. It's like the minimum 5 day process to carbonate. So it's, I want to keep those going, but I really want to start bartending again and start actually being able to make drinks to order, and for customers. And, it's really limiting when you can't be back there because you're busy doing something else. So I'm excited for that. Finally, if we can have indoor dining, it'd be incredible. Because once that all happens and we have indoor dining, I think we're going to be cooking with customers. Like we're going to be really busy and full every night. We're going to open for brunch and start doing that too.
Yeah, I don't doubt it, man. The food is fantastic there. The wife and I and some friends, we went there a few months back, and it's killer. It's not super duper traditional French cuisine, but the wife and I went to our honeymoon in Paris, and it kind of took us right back there with a couple dishes. So I highly recommend anyone who's listening to check out Perle in Pasadena. You won't be disappointed.
Everything is based on tradition, but it's a little spin. It's like more approachable.
Right.
Than the stuff you would be. The same dish in a fine dining restaurant would probably be the same flavor, but it's just a little bit different and more approachable. Plus Dean he's Armenian and has interesting background he's from New York, or no, he's not from New York. He's from the East Coast.
Yeah.
He's a dairy farmer. His whole family is.
Oh, wow.
And so, we had pomegranate molasses to things, and and our coq au vin is incredible with that little bit of pomegranate, and it just sweetens it up and darkens it.
Probably hands down one of the best dishes I had in the past 2 years. It was incredible.
Really good.
Yeah.
Really good.
I told my wife I would come back just for that, every day if I could.
The coq au vin's incredible.
And then the mussels is, so real quick before we sign off. So my wife and I went to Paris. I don't know if I told you this. So, we were staying near Moulin Rouge at an Airbnb for part of the time. and we were suffering from we were fine for 3 days, and then jet lag for some reason hit us 3 days after the fact, and we passed out one night. I think the first night we got to Airbnb, we passed out at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, just out cold. And before you know it, we woke up, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're wide awake now. We're like, shit. It's we have this LA mentality, we're fucked. So we realized we're not fucked because there's a bar that's still open, and we have the best mussels and fries that I've ever had. And it was at this, we're outside in the patio in November at a bar watching all the drunks stumbling around. And it was one of the best meals until we went to Perle, and obviously blew it out of the water because this was just some hole in the wall bar that we went to. But highly I cannot recommend Perle enough to anyone who's listening here in the LA area. Go check it out while you can. Real quick plug for you guys. Where can they find information at Perle, what you guys are doing, and where can they follow you? PerleRestaurant.com, and then Perle_restaurant on Instagram. Instagram is probably the thing we're most we're up on. She responds to every single message that's ever sent. So if you ever want to get in contact or contact them, it's Pauline running it the whole time. Then me, Scott Sullivan on Instagram. It's Scott Sullivan without the middle F. And then that's pretty much it. Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I'll probably have you on again because I think we can go deep dive into spirits. I think that would be a good, fun little episode. But man, it was good talking with you. It's been a minute. So there's been another episode of Corner Memoirs of the another episode of Corner Memoirs of the Service Industry. Scott, thank you. Guys, please, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that. Give me a thumbs up. That'd be fantastic. Follow us on Spotify and iTunes and all the bells and whistles and yada, yada, yada. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.